20 minutes late. Sunglasses on. A dress that cost more than most people make in 6 months. And the first words out of her mouth weren't, "I'm sorry." They were, "Traffic was terrible. You know how it is." That's how a 24-year-old billionaire's daughter walked into a courtroom that morning. And by the time she walked out, her entire life had changed forever. Stick around, because this is one of those cases where every single minute gets worse for the defendant and better for justice. If you love watching arrogant people get exactly what they deserve, smash that subscribe button right now, hit like, and trust me, you will not want to look away from this one, not even for a second. Because the ending? It's not what you think. Let's start from the beginning. On paper, this looked like just another traffic case. Reckless driving, leaving the scene of an accident, obstruction of justice, the kind of charges that get processed in minutes and forgotten by lunch. But this case was different, because the woman sitting at the defendant's table wasn't just anyone. Her name was Alexandra Whitmore, 24 years old, daughter of James Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Technologies, a man worth an estimated $2.3 billion. The Whitmore name was on hospital wings, on university buildings, on charity galas the entire city talked about for weeks afterward. And Alexandra clearly believed that name meant something in this room too. She was wrong, but she didn't know that yet. Here's what actually happened. A few weeks earlier, Alexandra had been driving her BMW through the city, running late for a meeting. She pulled up to a red light behind a minivan, and instead of stopping, she slammed right into the back of it. Inside that minivan was a woman named Maria Chen, a hospice nurse, a single mother. She'd just finished a brutal overnight shift and was driving her 2 young children, 7 and 9 years old, to school. The impact threw Maria forward. Her head hit the steering wheel. Blood. Her daughter in the back seat started screaming. Her son was crying, asking if they were going to die. Maria, shaking, bleeding, terrified, got out of her car to do what anyone would do. Exchange information. Make sure everyone was okay. Handle this like 2 human beings are supposed to after an accident. She walked toward Alexandra's car. And what happened next is the moment this entire case hinges on. Alexandra looked directly at her. Through the window, she saw Maria's face, bleeding, panicked. She saw the 2 terrified children in the back seat. And then she said something. The traffic camera caught it. Not perfectly, but clearly enough. Whatever, it's a piece of junk anyway. And then she drove away, around the wrecked minivan, running the red light in the process. For 3 days, 3 full days, Maria Chen had no idea who hit her. No license plate, no name, nothing. The police were investigating, but without more information, there wasn't much they could do. During those 3 days, Maria couldn't get to work. She had no car. She couldn't afford a rental. Her kids missed school because she had no way to get them there. She was losing wages she desperately needed just to survive. And where was Alexandra during those 3 days? We'll get to that, because when the judge brought it up in court, the courtroom's reaction was something nobody expected. But first, let's go back to that morning. The morning Alexandra walked into the courtroom like she owned the building. 20 minutes late isn't an accident, it's a statement. And everyone in that room read it loud and clear. Her attorney, an expensive suit from a downtown firm, rushed in ahead of her, apologizing before he'd even sat down. But Alexandra? She strolled in behind him like she was walking into a spa. Designer purse on her arm, sunglasses still on her face, heels clicking against the tile floor in a rhythm that practically screamed. "Look at me." The judge waited. Let her get all the way to her seat, and then calmly asked if there was a good reason for the tardiness. Alexandra removed her sunglasses, slowly, deliberately, like she was doing the room a favor. And then she said it. "Traffic was terrible. You know how it is. No apology. No, Your Honor. Nothing. Just a casual dismissal, like she'd been asked about the weather instead of why she'd disrespected a judge's time." Her attorney jumped in immediately, trying to smooth things over. "Sincere apologies. Won't happen again." All the things you'd expect a lawyer to say when his client just torched the room's patience in under 10 seconds. The judge nodded at him, then turned back to Alexandra and laid down the rule plainly. "This is a courtroom, not a social gathering. 9 a.m. means 9 a.m. Alexandra's response? A shrug. "Sure. Just sure." Like she was agreeing to grab coffee later. Now, picture the room at this point. Courtroom regulars. A few reporters who'd caught wind of the Whitmore name showing up to a hearing. And in the third row, sitting quietly in her hospital scrubs, fresh off a 12-hour overnight shift, Maria Chen. She'd come straight from work to watch this. To watch the woman who hit her, who looked at her bleeding face and her screaming children and drove away, sit there in a designer dress, acting like this entire process was beneath her. The judge reviewed the file, took her time, let the silence stretch. And that's when Alexandra made her next mistake. She pulled out her phone. Right there, under the table. Mid-proceeding, the judge noticed instantly. Miss Whitmore put the phone away. Alexandra looked up, almost startled that anyone had caught her. I'm just checking something important. Nothing is more important than these proceedings. Phone away. Now, she sighed dramatically like she'd just been asked to donate a kidney, and dropped the phone into her purse. Her attorney, sensing things were sliding sideways fast, tried to speed things along. Your Honor, if we could proceed. My client has another commitment this afternoon. Another commitment, as if this entire hearing, the charges, the victims, the consequences, was just one item on her calendar, squeezed in somewhere between a hair appointment and lunch. The judge leaned forward, and this is where the tone of the entire room shifted. Counselor, your client is facing serious charges. Reckless driving, hit and run, obstruction of justice. These aren't parking tickets. So unless her other commitment is a medical emergency, she'll stay here until we're finished, however long that takes. Alexandra leaned over and whispered something to her attorney. He shook his head quickly, clearly trying to get her to stop talking. She ignored him completely. Your Honor, with all due respect, this whole thing is kind of ridiculous. It was just a fender bender. My insurance will cover it. Just a fender bender. Let's sit with that for a second. Maria Chen's minivan was totaled. Her children were in the back seat, screaming when the impact hit. She missed days of work dealing with the aftermath. Her kids developed nightmares that lasted for weeks. But to Alexandra Whitmore, just a fender bender. Nothing to see here. The judge's voice dropped into that register that makes even seasoned attorneys nervous. Miss Whitmore, let me make sure I understand your position. You struck another vehicle, caused significant damage, and instead of stopping to exchange information as required by law, you fled the scene. And you're calling this ridiculous? Alexandra didn't back down. I mean, accidents happen. People are acting like I committed some major crime. Her attorney looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. You could tell he'd spent hours prepping her. Courtroom decorum, how to address a judge, the importance of showing remorse. She had ignored every single word of it. And then the judge did something that changed the entire energy of the room. She pulled up the traffic camera footage, played it on the courtroom monitor, for everyone to see. The video was crystal clear. Alexandra's BMW sitting at a red light, then lurching forward, slamming into the back of Maria's minivan. You could see Maria get out, visibly shaken, immediately checking on her kids in the back seat. Then Alexandra steps out of her car, looks at the damage, says something. The audio wasn't perfect, but you could make it out, whatever. It's a piece of junk anyway. Then she gets back in her car and drives around the minivan, running the red light on her way out. The courtroom went completely silent as the video ended. The judge looked at Alexandra. Her expression hadn't changed. No shame, no flicker of recognition that anything was wrong. Miss Whitmore, do you remember what you said to Miss Chen that day? Not really. I was stressed. The video shows you called her vehicle a piece of junk. And here is where Alexandra said something that made the entire gallery audibly gasp. Her lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. Well, I mean, it kind of was. Even her own attorney dropped his head into his hands. He knew. Right then, he knew exactly how badly this was about to go. But the judge wasn't finished. Not even close. She stood up from the bench. Now, if you've ever watched enough courtroom footage, you know what it means when a judge stands up. It means something big is coming. Every person in that room felt the shift instantly. Miss Whitmore, I want you to think very carefully about what you just said. You stood here in my courtroom, watched footage of yourself fleeing an accident scene, and your response was to insult the victim's vehicle. Do I have that right? For the first time, a flicker, just a flicker of uncertainty crossed Alexandra's face. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? I just meant that my car is nicer. So obviously, the damage to hers would be less expensive to fix. Read that again, because that's not an excuse. That's not even a denial. That's an actual worldview. In Alexandra's mind, the fact that her car cost more meant the harm she caused mattered less. The judge had to pause, genuinely pause, because this wasn't just privilege talking anymore. This was something deeper, something that revealed exactly how this 24-year-old saw the entire world, and everyone beneath her in it. Your car is nicer, the judge repeated slowly. Therefore, the damage you caused matters less? Basically, yeah. Her attorney shot up out of his seat. Your Honor, may I have a moment with my client? Sit down, counselor. Your client is doing just fine speaking for herself. And she absolutely was. just not in the way she thought. The judge turned back to Alexandra. Tell me about that day. Walk me through your thinking. Alexandra sighed, like she'd just been asked to explain quantum physics to a child. I was late for a meeting. The light turned yellow and I tried to stop, but I hit the gas instead of the brake. It was an accident. That's why they call them accidents. And when you saw that you'd hit another vehicle with children inside. I checked. They looked fine. Kids cry over everything. And that's when Maria Chen, sitting quietly in the gallery this entire time, made a small sound. A sound of pure disbelief. She was holding a tissue, her face a mix of anger and heartbreak. The judge glanced over, then turned back to Alexandra, her voice sharper now. Miss Whitmore, those children were terrified. They had nightmares for weeks afterward. The youngest stopped wanting to ride in cars. And here is the moment that absolutely detonated the entire courtroom. Alexandra's response was immediate. No hesitation. No filter. That's not my fault. That's their mom being dramatic and making them scared. The courtroom erupted, people shouting, the bailiff calling for order. Even Alexandra's attorney, a man who had clearly seen everything in his career, looked completely stunned by what his own client had just said out loud. In open court, on the record, a mother, bleeding, bringing her kids to school, hit from behind, left stranded for 3 days. And Alexandra Whitmore had just blamed her for her own children's trauma. The judge waited for the silence to return. And when it did, her voice cut through the room like a blade. You're blaming a mother for her children's fear after you crashed into them and fled? I'm just saying kids take cues from their parents. If she'd stayed calm, they would have been fine. At this point, the judge sat back for a moment. Decades on the bench, she'd seen criminals show remorse. Defendants who made terrible mistakes, but at least understood the weight of what they'd done. Alexandra Whitmore wasn't any of those things. She was something the judge had seen more and more of in recent years. Someone so insulated by wealth that consequences had simply stopped being real to her. A concept that applied to other people, not her. Let's talk about what happened after you left the scene, the judge said, flipping through the file. According to the police report, you drove straight to your country clubs. You had lunch. You played 9 holes of golf. You didn't contact your insurance company until 3 days later, when Miss Chen tracked you down through your license plate. Is that accurate? I needed time to process what happened. You needed time to process. While Miss Chen needed time to figure out how she'd get to work without a car, how she'd afford a rental, how she'd manage her kids' school schedule. Alexandra's jaw tightened. That's what insurance is for, your insurance, which you didn't contact for 3 days. What were you doing in the meantime? I had things, events. My life doesn't stop because someone's car got dented. Then the judge pulled out something else. Alexandra's driving record, 3 speeding tickets in 2 years, a citation for running a red light, another reckless driving charge, one that had mysteriously been reduced after some negotiation by her attorney, a pattern, a clear, undeniable pattern of behavior that had never once cost her anything. Miss Whitmore, this isn't your first traffic offense. Everyone speeds sometimes. Not everyone runs from accidents. I didn't run. I left. The semantic games were exhausting, and you could see her attorney's face getting redder by the second. Every word out of her mouth was making things worse, and there wasn't a single thing he could do about it. You left an accident scene without providing information. That's called a hit and run. It's a crime. And then Alexandra's expression hardened. And she said the one sentence that explained everything. My dad's lawyer said this would get dismissed. There it was, the real reason for the attitude. The real reason for the sunglasses, the lateness, the phone, the shrugs, the complete absence of fear. Someone had told this girl ahead of time that none of this mattered, that she'd walk in, sit down, and walk right back out untouched. The judge's response was instant and ice cold. Your dad's lawyer isn't here. I am. And I decide what happens in this courtroom. But he said that with my record and my family's standing in the community. The judge held up a hand, stopped her cold. Stop right there. I don't care about your family's standing. I don't care who your father is, where you summer, or which country club you belong to. None of that matters here. Alexandra's confidence, for the first time all morning, actually cracked. What do you mean? It doesn't matter. I mean that in my courtroom you're just another defendant who broke the law. Your last name doesn't grant you immunity. She looked desperately at her attorney. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He already knew where this was heading, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The judge pulled out the sentencing guidelines. Miss Whitmore, hit and run with property damage, carries serious penalties. But when children are involved, when there's a pattern of reckless behavior, when there's zero remorse shown, those penalties increase significantly. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. And what I'm about to do is going to teach you something your parents clearly never did. Alexandra's face went pale. For the first time since walking into that courtroom, sunglasses, designer dress, smug attitude and all, she looked genuinely, actually afraid. But before sentencing, the judge had one more thing to do. Before I deliver your sentence, I want you to hear something. Miss Chen provided a victim impact statement. I'm going to read it aloud. Alexandra shifted in her seat. Her attorney put a hand on her arm. She shook it off, and then the judge began to read. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm a single mother of 2 children, ages 7 and 9. On the morning of March 15th, my entire life changed because someone decided their time was more valuable than my safety. The courtroom went dead silent. I was stopped at a red light when Alexandra Whitmore's vehicle slammed into my car. The impact threw me forward. My head hit the steering wheel. My daughter Emma, in the back seat, started screaming. My son Michael was crying, asking if we were going to die. Alexandra was staring at the table now. Couldn't look up. I got out of my car, shaking, bleeding from a cut on my forehead. I walked toward Miss Whitmore's vehicle to exchange information. She looked directly at me through her window. I saw her face. She saw mine. She saw my children in the back seat. Then she drove away. The weight of those words hung in the air like smoke. For 3 days, I didn't know who hit me. The police were investigating, but without a license plate, it was difficult. My car was totaled. I couldn't afford a rental. I missed 2 days of work because I had no way to get there. I lost wages I desperately needed. The judge's voice stayed steady, firm. But worse than the financial burden was the fear. My children are now terrified to ride in cars. Emma has nightmares about the crash. Michael asks me every morning if we're going to have another accident. They've lost their sense of safety because someone couldn't be bothered to stop and take responsibility. I work as a nurse at County General Hospital. I spend my days caring for people, helping them heal, showing compassion when they're at their most vulnerable. The person who hit me showed me none of that. She looked at my children and drove away. What kind of person does that? The judge set down the statement, looked directly at Alexandra. That's what kind of person you were that day, Miss Whitmore. Someone who looked at 2 terrified children and chose convenience over compassion. I didn't know they were scared, Alexandra whispered. You didn't stay long enough to find out. Her attorney tried one more time. Your Honor, your client has expressed nothing but excuses and entitlement. Now she's going to hear what accountability sounds like. And then, the verdict. Alexandra Whitmore, I find you guilty of leaving the scene of an accident causing property damage and personal injury. Here's your sentence. The entire courtroom leaned forward. You could feel it, the collective breath being held. You will serve 60 days in county jail, not work release, not house arrest, actual jail time. Alexandra gasped. You can't, I can, and I am. Furthermore, your driver's license is suspended for 1 year. After that year, you'll need to retake both the written and driving tests to get it reinstated. Her face went completely white. You'll complete 200 hours of community service at County General Hospital, where Miss Chen works. You'll see what it means to actually help people instead of running from them. But I have commitments. Charity events, those commitments just changed. You'll also pay full restitution to Miss Chen for her vehicle, her medical expenses, her lost wages, and the therapy costs for her children. The judge wasn't finished. Additionally, you'll attend a victim impact panel, where you'll hear from people whose lives were destroyed by hit-and-run drivers. Maybe their stories will teach you what your parents' money couldn't. Alexandra was crying now. But these weren't tears of remorse. Not yet, they were the tears of someone realizing, for the first time in her entire life, that consequences were real, and they were landing on her, right now, with no one to stop them. Your Honor, this is excessive, her attorney protested. My client has no criminal record. Your client has a pattern of reckless behavior and zero accountability. This sentence is designed to break that pattern. The judge looked at Alexandra one final time. You told me earlier that you have things to do, important things. Let me tell you what's actually important. What's important is a 7-year-old girl who can't sleep because she's afraid of cars. What's important is a 9-year-old boy who thinks every traffic light might end in violence. What's important is a mother who dedicates her life to healing others and got run down by someone who couldn't spare 5 minutes to do the right thing. The tears were flowing freely now. But the judge wasn't done teaching this lesson. You drove away because you thought you could. Because no one ever told you no. Because your whole life, money, and status have insulated you from reality. Well, reality just caught up. The gavel came down. When you're sitting in that jail cell, I want you to think about Emma and Michael. Think about their nightmares. Think about their fear. Think about what you could have prevented. If you'd just stayed and faced what you did, take her into custody. As the bailiffs approached, Alexandra's composure completely shattered. She turned to her father, desperate, panicked, and reached out. Daddy, please, do something. James Whitmore stood up slowly. For a moment, just one moment, it looked like he might step in, like he might do exactly what he'd always done. Pull strings, make a call, fix it. But that's not what happened. He looked at his daughter, his voice heavy with disappointment, and said, Alexandra, you did this to yourself. Then he sat back down. The bailiffs led her away. Her designer heels clicked against the courthouse floor, the same heels that had clicked in so confidently just an hour earlier, now carrying her further and further from the privileged bubble she'd lived in her entire life. Her mother followed her with her eyes. But she didn't move, didn't speak, didn't help. The judge turned to Maria Chen, who had sat through every single moment of this with quiet dignity, hands folded in her lap. Miss Chen, do you have anything you'd like to say? Maria stood, and there was a strength in the way she carried herself, the kind of strength that comes from surviving something and refusing to let it break you. Your Honor, I don't take pleasure in seeing anyone suffer, but my children need to see that the world can be fair, that people who hurt others don't just get away with it because they have money. Her voice grew stronger. Emma asked me last week if being rich means you don't have to follow rules. She's 7 years old, and she's already learning that some people matter more than others. I couldn't answer her, because I didn't know if she was right. She looked toward the door where Alexandra had disappeared. Now I can tell her that everyone matters equally, that there are still people who believe in justice. Thank you, Your Honor. The courtroom broke into applause, and the judge let it happen. Sometimes people need to see good triumph over arrogance. They need to witness accountability in real time. When the room finally quieted, the judge addressed everyone present. Let me be clear about something. This case wasn't about punishing wealth. It was about holding someone accountable regardless of wealth. There's a difference. She scanned the gallery. Rich, poor, middle class. It doesn't matter in my courtroom. What matters is taking responsibility for your actions. What matters is treating other human beings with basic decency and respect. And then, James Whitmore stood again. Your Honor, may I approach? The judge nodded. He walked forward, and up close you could see it. He'd aged. The weight of his daughter's choices written across his face. Your Honor, I want to apologize. Not for my daughter's actions, I can't control those, but for raising someone who thought she could behave this way. His voice cracked, just slightly. My wife and I gave Alexandra everything. We thought we were helping her. But we created someone who believes the rules don't apply. That's on us. He pulled out a checkbook. I'd like to establish a fund for Miss Chen's children. For their education, their therapy, whatever they need. Not to reduce my daughter's sentence. Not to buy anything. Just because it's the right thing to do. The bailiff stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, that's not necessary. Maybe not, he replied. But it's what I should do. What I should have taught my daughter to do. The judge watched this exchange closely. Here was a father, finally, after everything, understanding something most parents never do, that protecting your child from consequences doesn't help them. It destroys them. Mr. Whitmore, the judge said, I appreciate the gesture. Miss Chen can decide whether to accept it, but I want you to understand something. The best thing you can do for your daughter now is let her serve this sentence. Let her feel what accountability means. He nodded slowly. I know, and I will. No lawyers pulling strings. No donations to reduce her time. She needs this. He turned to Maria. Miss Chen, I'm sorry, truly sorry for what my daughter did to you and your children. You deserved better. Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she held his gaze. Thank you. That means more than you know. So what happened next? Over the following months, updates trickled in. Alexandra served her full 60 days. No special treatment. No early release. The jail staff later said she struggled at first, demanding privileges she simply didn't have anymore. Things she'd never had to ask for in her entire life suddenly weren't there. But gradually something shifted. Her 200 hours of community service put her face to face with Maria Chen every single week. At first, Alexandra avoided her completely, wouldn't make eye contact, kept her distance. But Maria, with a grace that's honestly hard to put into words, didn't lecture her, didn't bring up the crash. She just talked to her. told her stories about her patients, her kids, her life, and slowly, Alexandra started listening. By the end of her 200 hours, something remarkable happened. Alexandra asked if she could keep volunteering, not because the court required it anymore, because she wanted to. She wrote a letter to Emma and Michael, apologizing, taking full responsibility, no excuses this time. Maria shared it with them when she felt they were ready. And James Whitmore? He followed through. The fund was established. Emma and Michael's college educations are fully paid for. Their therapy continues, helping them process everything they went through. 6 months after her sentencing, Alexandra walked back into that same courtroom, not as a defendant this time. She wanted to say thank you, standing in the exact spot where she'd once stood in defiance. Sunglasses, designer dress, smug attitude. She said something completely different. Your Honor, I hated you that day. I thought you were cruel, unfair. She paused. You saved my life. I was becoming someone terrible, someone empty. You stopped that. The judge looked at this young woman, transformed by accountability in a way no amount of money ever could have managed. I didn't save you, Alexandra. You saved yourself by finally accepting responsibility. That's all I ever wanted. Alexandra nodded. I'm enrolling in nursing school. I want to actually help people, not just write checks to feel important. That's what justice looks like, not revenge. Transformation. Maria Chen got her car fixed. Her kids are healing, slowly but surely. Alexandra discovered a purpose beyond privilege. And somewhere out there, a 7-year-old girl named Emma learned something most adults never fully grasp, that the world can be fair, that people do face consequences, that justice, when properly served, protects everyone equally. That's why judges like this sit on that bench, not to punish, to teach, to transform, to prove that accountability isn't cruelty. It's the greatest gift anyone can give. So, what do you think? Did she get exactly what she deserved, or do you think the sentence went too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this story kept you hooked from start to finish, you know what to do. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next case. Because trust me, we've got plenty more entitled defendants about to meet judges who refuse to back down. See you in the next one.